Students, here we have second part of the very first chapter of statistics. Now, statistics is what you did in the form of data handling in your lower classes. If you remember in maths, this used to be one of the last chapters in which you used to draw some bar graphs or some diagrams or make some table in order to present some numbers, some data. Data are nothing but numerical statements. Now we must remember that it cannot be just one observation. If I say that pocket allowance of Sanjeev is 1500 per month, that is not data. But if I collect the details of pocket allowance of 20 such children and present it maybe in the form of a table or any other graph, then that will be called as data. Similarly, if we talk about population of India over different years, then that can be called as data. Statistics in initial days was called political arithmetic. What was the reason for this? The first major reason was that till the Second World War at least, whether it was Germans or Americans, whether it was Hitler or Winston Churchill, all the major leaders wanted to know how many young people can be enrolled in army. Similarly, the leaders of different nations wanted to know how much of land is under cultivation, what is the production from the land, and so on, so that they could earn more revenue in the form of taxes. Now, if you look at the meaning of statistics, statistics can be defined in both its plural sense, where we have just discussed that these are nothing but numerical facts which are systematically collected. On the other hand, it can also be talked about in singular sense, where we talk about statistics as a science. We here talk about the methods, the tools, the stages which are used for the collection, interpretation, analysis of data. So, these are the two ways that we define statistics. Now, what are the features of statistics in plural sense? First and foremost is that it is aggregate of facts. See, whatever are the numbers available to us in the form of statistics are actually factual. They are facts. Second thing is they are represented, they are expressed in the form of numbers. So, they are numerically expressed. Then there can be multiplicity of causes. That means that the reason for collection of a particular observation can be different from that of another group of observations. Now, statistics cannot be highly accurate at all the time. They can be reasonably accurate but not fully or perfectly accurate. Then sometimes the data which is collected by us, it's mutually related in the sense that, say, if we are collecting data about price of any commodity, it is going to be related to the demand for that particular commodity. Similarly, the prices of different commodities across can also be comparable. They can be compared to each other. Then whenever we talk about statistical methods, the methods are used with some predetermined objectives. We have already an aim in mind, a goal in mind before we apply these methods. Then another important feature is that it is enumerated, means we give the estimates in numbers. And of course, the most important thing is all this is collected in a systematic manner. Now, if you look at this particular slide, you will come to know about the various stages which are there for the collection, organization, presentation, etc. Now, when we talk about statistics, in the terms as we have mentioned earlier, in singular sense, we talk about these stages, we talk about these methods. So, these stages or methods are: first is collection. Now, when we talk about collection, we talk here about the ways in which they can be collected and also the source. Now, as you can see, the collection can be done from the primary source or the secondary source. For example, if I give you a project that all the students of class 11 have to collect data from their neighborhood regarding the average salary earned by them in each month. Suppose there are 50 such families. Now, that 50 is the universe or population in terms of statistics. The girls, as they go to these houses and collect data, that data will become the primary source. Now, we have a lot of data collected by, say, 50 students. Now, if that data is used by somebody else, then that becomes the secondary source. If we take it at the national level, we will come to know that India has an agency which is called as CSO or Central Statistical Organization. We also have NSSO, that is National Sample Survey Organization, and these two organizations, they collect data in the form of it is usually in census form. Census means the entire population or the universe is considered. Now, that data is going to be huge. It will cover all rural areas, urban areas, all the states. It will cover people whether they are educated or uneducated, and employed or unemployed, skilled or unskilled, so on. So, there will be many categories, many classifications. Now, this becomes the primary source. If that data, any particular part of it or the entire data, is used by one of the government agencies to project how much is the unemployment in India, then that becomes the secondary thing. And if, say, instead of collecting data from each and every unit, the data is collected randomly. Randomly means instead of covering entire India, we just go for one or two states at random, or we just go for some population which has been selected randomly, then that is what you will call as sampling. It is the same as if you go to buy rice and you want to know which variety of rice is good, then you will just pick a handful of it and you will decide whether that variety is good or not. So that handful is the sample of rice. If we look at the second stage, this stage is again something which is called as organization. Now, whenever we have any data, we cannot just keep on writing that Mr. Ramesh has got 5,000 rupees as pocket allowance, Mr. Sharma has got 6,000 as a pocket allowance, Miss Sonali has got 10,000 as pocket allowance. If we do so much of writing, then it will become difficult, especially if there are lot many of people to be covered. Now that data needs to be organized so that it becomes concise. So we make some arrangements, we make them some tables which are called as arrays, And we also, as you have done in your lower classes, use tally bars or tally marks to present the data. Now I will like to explain these tally bars a little more. Let us for example take your very class. Say there are 50 students. Students secure different marks, say in accountancy. Now there can be some students who are scoring equal marks. Say for example there are 10 students who are scoring 25 out of 30. There are 5 students who are getting 28 out of 30. There are some students who are getting 15 out of 30. So instead of writing each and every student's name and the marks against that name, what we can do is simply present it in the form of a table. Now that table can be such that if I write say 10 marks, now how many students have got 10 marks? Say 5 students. So I will make 5 tally marks against it and so on. So that is a way of organizing data. The third stage is that of presentation of data. Data can be presented in the form of tables, graphs, diagrams. Now you have done all these things in your lower classes in maths, and we will be doing them in detail in subsequent lessons. The fourth stage is of course analysis, which consists of averages, dispersion and index numbers. I will just introduce averages as of now because that is the thing that you have done, and rest of the two we will be doing in subsequent chapters. Averages, as you have done arithmetic mean or simply mean. Now what is that? Suppose I want to know about the per capita income of India. What I will do, I will take the total income, the total national income, and divide it by the population of India. That way I am able to work out an average. On an average, what an Indian is earning. Now this is what you call as analysis. The last stage, but a very important stage, is interpretation. Now you have collected the data, you have organized it, presented it, analyzed it. Now you need to draw some results, some conclusions based upon it. For example, let us take any data which is there regarding how much of money is being earned by different people. Now from that we can assess whether there is equality in distribution of income or not. So whether it is equality or inequality becomes our conclusion. If we move further, we have scope of statistics. Just as we had discussed scope of economics, statistics also has a certain nature. We can call it both science as well as an art. It has certain subject matter, whatever we are studying in it, in the form of descriptive or inferential statistics, and it has got its limitations. Now you are aware that statistics is a science. Why? Because whatever numerical statements, whatever observations we are collecting, it is done in a very systematic manner. So that is why we call it as science. On the other hand, as an art, it helps us in putting to practice whatever principles we have read. So whatever data has been collected, on the basis of it, if we come to know that there is widespread poverty and unemployment in India, then government can frame some policies to do away with that, with these problems. So that is why statistics is also called an art. Now if we look at the subject matter of statistics, you will come to know that it is both descriptive. Why descriptive? Because we are using here different methods to go in detail for collection, organization, etc. And it is inferential. Inferential means we are able to draw conclusions on the basis of a given sample regarding population. So, whatever we want to know, we can draw conclusions regarding that. Then we will move on to limitations. The first and the foremost thing is statistics talks only about quantitative things, not qualitative aspects. It doesn't talk about honesty, it doesn't talk about sympathy. It studies aggregates only, but doesn't study the individual units. Then the homogeneity of data is essential. Suppose I am taking into consideration production of rice on different plots of land. Now I need to see it that the different plots of land are of same area. It can't be as we had seen in the chapter village of Palampur in class 9th, that some farmer is having 0.5 hectare of land, somebody is having 2 hectares, somebody is even having 10 hectare. So that way there will be lot of discrepancy, so we cannot use it. Then the results are true only on an average. Now let us consider the per capita income thing that we had discussed a little earlier. Now per capita income also doesn't give us a true picture of our economy. See, there are industrialists like Ambani's, Tata's, etc., who have got lot of income. On the other hand, there are certain people who are daily wage holders and they hardly have any income. So if we take an average, it will seem to us that yes, everybody is getting a good considerable average income, but it may not be so. Then the statistics, whatever we collect, it can be used only by experts. Then of course this is what causes distrust in statistics. We sometimes do not believe it. It is prone to misuse. Let us for example take the way the news reporters nowadays, or the paparazzi or the political leaders, they misuse any kind of data which is available to them. Then if we are not referring to anything properly, then the results may prove to be wrong. So we always need to keep some reference. We need to keep the data in front of us in order to draw the results properly. Let us now move on to the functions and the importance of statistics. Now statistics helps us to understand any economic problem in a quantitative manner. We can precisely say that these many people are living below poverty line in India, or these many people are in the working age population in India. So a particular number is given. Then we can make comparison between the sectors, which is what we call as intersectoral comparison. What are intersectoral comparisons? We can compare how much is the contribution made by primary sector, secondary sector, tertiary sector to the GDP in India. This you have done in class 10th in sectors of economy. Similarly, we can make intertemporal comparison. Intertemporal means between different years. See, whatever was the population of India in 1951 and what is the population of India at present. We can make a comparison. Then it helps us to study the cause and effect relationship. Say at a particular point of time the prices of vegetables has increased, the demand for vegetables will decrease. We will try to abstain from buying too many of them if we really don't require them. So it studies the cause and effect relationship. Then it helps us in construction of economic theories or models. Let us for example take trade between any two countries, bilateral trade. So now if we see that India has an advantage in production of cotton, India will export cotton. On the other hand, if we feel that India is in disadvantage, it cannot produce at a low cost jute, then it will import jute. So these are the trade models that we use. Similarly, it helps us in making economic forecasting. Just take for example the present COVID situation. We knew that if lockdown will take place, the economic growth will come down. Now, if you have been hearing news, you will come to know that there has been negative growth rate, because before the COVID situation itself, India was experiencing low economic growth. We were just having an economic growth of say 4%. So forecasting was done that it will go even lower, and because of COVID it has gone to negative as per some of the international agencies. Now it helps in formulation of policies. Now see, if at a particular stage the government is saying that the economic growth is too low, it will provide some kind of incentives to the manufacturers, some help, loans to be provided easily. So these are all government policies. Then it helps us to understand the economic equilibrium. What is economic equilibrium? It can be for consumer as well as for producer. As a consumer, if I see that from something I am not getting that much utility, then I will not be ready to pay more for it. For example, at a particular point of time, if I feel that I do not have good amount of satisfaction from buying a particular good, I will not buy it. Similarly, the producer will be in equilibrium when he is getting great profits. We will study about these later on in subsequent chapters of consumer and producer equilibrium. So, what we need to understand is that statistical methods are no substitutes for common sense. See, one size doesn't fit all. If on a particular day a teacher of your school who is in charge of annual function, she finds out that this is the size of dress required for one girl who is participating in a dance, and instead of taking measurement for other girls, she decides to place an order for all girls of the same size of dress. Then that is not a good thing. Why? Because the same size of dress will not fit all the girls. For some it will be small, for some it will be too large. So we have to think that we need to study more about it. Now in this particular case, the teacher should have taken measurements of all the girls. So it is in the hands of the user how he makes use of statistics. And at any point of time, common sense should be used, that what is to be done in this particular situation. If we take an example, we may think that in a particular area the doctors are more, and because of the doctors being more in that particular locality, the number of patients or the number of diseases is also more. Is there any correlation between the two things? No, not at all. Rather, this correlation which we are talking about is totally wrong. So it depends upon the users what they want to conclude. So this is what you call as distrust of statistics. Statistics is sometimes called as rainbow of lies. It is called pack of lies. It is said to be proving nothing. But is it true? Now, distrust arises because something has been done wrong by either the collector of the statistics or the user of the statistics. So sometimes politicians, news reporters, etc., they manipulate statistics for meeting their own requirements, to meet their selfish motives. That is not very good. So this becomes the main cause for distress. First is, the different kinds of stats are obtained to study a given problem. Now, if we want to study about poverty, there may be different statisticians who would like to study it in different manners. Then statistics, as I said above, can be altered. Altered means changed. Then there are people who can be confused when the given statistics is wrongly presented to them. This is what happens when we see the debates and all in news channels. Sometimes all the statistics which are quoted by the reporters or politicians are not correctly presented. Then, of course, the collector of the data, the one who has done the census or the sampling, he should not be partial. He should be collecting the correct data. So, what is our conclusion? Statistics don't prove anything. They are simply tools in the hands of statisticians, and statistics is never at fault. The fault lies with the users. We need to be cautious. We need to be vigilant how to use it. And of course, how can we remove the distress? What remedies can we suggest for it? First is we need to keep in mind all the limitations of statistics, and we should not use it in a partial manner, in a biased manner. And of course, statistics should be used by experts. Now, I hope this particular chapter is very much clear to you. If you look at the last slide, you will come across the questions that you are supposed to be attempting. Thank you so much.